Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Why we had to do that was because if we didn't, we would have seen the markets losing confidence, potentially a run on the pound, the economy crashing.
So that was the Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell, speaking to Sky News over the weekend. Another dire economic warning from the Labour government, setting the tone as MPs return to Westminster.
Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Welcome to the programme. There's a yellow weather warning for thunderstorms in place for much of Britain today. Not in London, though, although perhaps a different kind of dark cloud hanging over Westminster as MPs get back to business. Although I wonder, is that just sort of back to school blues you're going to have from people filing into the House of Commons today? The government's certainly setting the scene with warnings of painful decisions ahead, thinking about the October budget. And Lucy Powell there talking about the decision Labour's already made to means test pensioners' winter fuel allowance. She says it's about not losing the confidence of the market. Some questions over that we'll get into in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to add to that feeling of reckoning then in the air, MPs going back to Parliament after the recess. Yes, it is back to school week for most pupils in the UK. The government's preparations for the October budget are ramping up. The Conservatives, meanwhile, Stephen, are focused on their own leadership race. So can Labour work with the nation's finances? How should they negotiate the big events and navigate them in the coming parliamentary session?
Well, our senior economics writer, Philip Aldrick, has his new pencil case and school bag ready for this term in Parliament. First of all, Phil, on that question of what Lucy Powell was saying is there could have been a run on the pound if they hadn't means-tested winter fuel payments. Does that argument hold water for you?
Not really, no. But you can see why you'd say that. I mean, the Truss mini budget fiasco, the kind of the final domino which tipped the markets was, on the Sunday where Kwasi Kwarteng said, yeah, we're going to do more of this, more of these tax giveaways or whatever, which unsettled everyone. And it was this £1.4 billion tax cut for, I think it was around that, for the to get rid of the highest rate, the 45p rate, and that was that. Certainly in the government at the time saying that was a trigger point. So there's roughly the same amount of money. You could maybe draw that comparison. I think it's very, very spurious because there was no sense that Labour are completely losing control of public spending here. It was just a case that they identified existing spending plans and they said, hey guys, we're up front and we're trying to deal with this. So it was a completely different narrative. They didn't need, I believe, was complete overstatement from Lucy Powell. Okay,
interesting. So going a bit off script then, I mean, the winter fuel payment goes to 10 million pensioners, so it is a huge issue. The post-election buzz, the sort of summer sunshine and levity. I mean, if Stephen Carroll's introduction didn't put paid to summer fun, then maybe thinking about the budget might do. How long do you think the idea of stability paying off for the UK, just the fact of having a fresh UK government in place, which admittedly is only since just before the summer holidays, that alone would deliver benefits for the country? How long has that really lasted? I.e., is the honeymoon been and gone?
Well, if you ignore the Prime Minister's and the Chancellor's commentary, what's happened in the economy since the election is that growth has accelerated. Things are looking better. Interest rates have been cut. So the economic backdrop is definitely rosier. Andrew Bailey clearly feels relatively confident that this is, the soft landing is now, the wheels are touching down. It's all good. The bad news has been that despite the better economic outlook, the fiscal position has actually been slightly worse than expected. So, growth has not delivered the fiscal benefits, the higher tax revenues and lower spending that would normally be associated with. So they have got a legitimate gripe to say that the fiscal position is not as rosy, and obviously the OBR is going to have to make a judgment on the tax richness of the economy, so to decide how much tax we generate for every pound of growth, and they may have to reduce their estimates of that, which would mean that over the period you would see, if the growth position roughly remains the same, you would automatically see a bit more of a black hole in the public finances. So that it does feel like they've got something to address there.
So, yeah, and I mean, so the OBR and the government are preparing now for a budget on the 30th of October. Is there any chance that picture varies for better or for worse between now and the end of October? Because we had, Rachel Reeves talking about the extent of the hole in the public finances just a couple of weeks after the election. We're now, I suppose, heading towards 2 months since the election. And I'm wondering, is there in another 2 months, could things look different?
Yeah, so the key judgments that are being taken now, the first one is on September the 19th. The Office for Budget Responsibility will deliver to the Treasury their set of forecasts and what those forecasts mean for the public finances, assuming nothing else changes. And at that point, they'll see whether they've got a bit of extra money or if they've got even less than they thought. And then, Jeremy Hunt, basically the Treasury would brief it out, like what the number was, almost to the decimal point. I don't know whether Rachel Reeves, it was very unusual, so I don't know whether Rachel Reeves will do that. But even if we don't get a number for the hole that needs to be filled, or the sunny uplands that she's suddenly got, you'll probably be able to tell from the tone. Like if the rhetoric ramps up about we're going to have more pain, if they get, we have to deal with problems, then you can interpret that as meaning that the fiscal position has worsened.
Okay, but hang on a second. It's not even a week since we had Keir Starmer, again, kind of trotting out doom and gloom amidst the summer holidays. He talked about things will get worse before they improve. I mean, sending people off on their holidays, basically worrying about tax rises to come. Some MPs are concerned that that's sort of too gloomy. Was that a bit of positioning ahead of the budget? Again, does the rhetoric around that change in the next few weeks?
If they do get a bit more borrowing headroom than was expected, then obviously the actual budget can be the good news moment after preparing everybody for misery.
Yes.
So, but the longer term picture here, if Labour want to go into the next election cutting taxes and saying we fixed the economy, now we can cut your taxes, then what you're going to do is today you're going to raise the taxes as part of the fixing process. The narrative that they're building is, whether it works or not, is that it's the Tories that are responsible for the tax rises that they're going to have to implement. It's a very questionable argument, but that's what the narrative is. But then, in 3 years' time, the economy recovers. Those extra tax rises, therefore, have been generating a lot more revenue. Your fiscal hole gets smaller. They can cut those taxes going into the next election. And it's a playbook for every government to basically bake in misery right at the start, and then it's forgotten about as long as you can build a different rhetoric after the budget. And you probably need to build a bit of a rhetoric around the time of the budget for what your vision for the country is, really.
But is there also a risk that you're damaging confidence at the same time by saying how bad everything is? I mean, we're looking at the survey from the Institute of Directors over the weekend talking about optimism plummeting among company bosses. I mean, is that a risk if you're going to keep talking like this about so much pain to come?
They can get through to October the 30th being gloomy if on October the 30th we suddenly see that things aren't as gloomy as they were saying. If on October the 30th it's more gloomy and the warning is that there's even more gloom to come, I reckon you can end up sort of deterring investors and deterring business investment. You've got, the narrative isn't going to be useful if it hangs around for too long.
Yeah, okay. So give us the bullet points then of what we're expecting in the budget in terms of the 30th of October. I mean, tax rises surely to fill this £22 billion black hole that Labour has identified. I mean, is it going to be inheritance, capital gains tax, the energy profit levy? What are the kind of levers that we're watching now?
I think they're going to use some accounting trickery in the first instance.
Always a popular favourite.
Yeah. They have a debt rule they've inherited, which they can change the measure of the debt in the fiscal rules, and that potentially, it's technical, but it saves about 20 billion quid. That is something like 3p on income tax that they wouldn't have to do. Right, that's a lot. That's a big chunk of money. And then there may be changes around. I mean, they have options of changes around the Bank of England's interest. It's a quantitative tightening process, which is adding to the fiscal problems at the moment. So they could do small measures around there. I don't think they'd want to tinker too much with the Bank of England. As the beneficiaries of the Bank of England scheme actually now are the money, this interest is being paid to commercial banks, high street banks. You could just say, right, I'm going to windfall tax those banks for this extra interest income that they're earning through the QE effects. Again, it's quite technical, but so those are two ways in which you could sort of avoid inflicting pain on the general public. But then, depending on how big the hole is, then obviously it sounds like capital gains tax, so taxes on wealth, inheritance tax, capital gains tax seem to be they talk about the broadest shoulders. Those kind of areas. Obviously, VAT, national insurance, income tax, corporation tax have all been ruled out. So wealth taxes will be the area you'd expect them to have a pop at.
Okay, on the flip side, cuts to benefits, cuts to welfare. That's the other side of the ledger. That's on the agenda, as well. So it sounds like they are telling departments to find savings where they can. They have specifically mentioned welfare. So they've talked about tax rises, and they've not dismissed the idea of tax rises, and they've not dismissed the idea of changes to welfare to save some money. So I think they want to show that they're not just taxing the rich, they're also trying to take difficult decisions as well, which is difficult for Labour.
Yeah, indeed, and plenty more to hear, I'm sure, between now and the end of October as well on what may or may not be done, and I'm sure plenty of the industry groups will be getting involved in that as well. I've already heard actually from the North Sea oil and gas industry lobby as well, talking about the risk from the increased taxation that they're going to be experiencing. So the government's announced a higher windfall tax and removal of an investment allowance, which they're saying now that could lead to an investment slump. So that's just one industry lobby group. They're going to be talking about the effects of changes as well, and I'm sure the others in representing industry will be looking at that as well. Philip Aldrick, our senior economics reporter, thank you so much for joining us as we look ahead to that. We'll be hearing from the Chancellor tomorrow. Actually, it'll be interesting to see if she manages to hint at any surprises while we're in those conversations with MPs.
Yeah, and we're reading the mood just very carefully, aren't we, in terms of what is the agenda, what's it going to be for the next few weeks, with what is still a relatively new government, of course, back from recess now. That's it from us, though, for today. It's going to be an interesting few months ahead.
If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo and our audio engineer was Sean Grastamakia. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.